Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. Monday now, the 4th of November, 2024. We officially do have Tropical Storm Rafael now in the Caribbean Sea. The information updating in real time here from the National Hurricane Center. This means that it is probably a little bit ahead of schedule. I'm going to show you a couple of posts off of social media indicating as such. And we could be dealing with quite the formidable hurricane for Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and eventually Cuba. And then, of course, we need to see what happens with this as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. Quite the split, as an example, between the GFS operational and the Euro operational. Wait till I show you that. So yes, a Gulf hurricane eventually looks likely. Of course, this will be the November version because we're not in peak season anymore. We're getting towards the end of the hurricane season, and so conditions are quite different. But that doesn't mean we are completely off the hook in the Gulf or the Gulf Coast. But we'll deal with that as it comes. Let's first take a look at the National Hurricane Center homepage. Again, the information is starting to update. The forecast advisory comes out first, usually, and there it is, Tropical Storm Rafael advisory number 5. Just got updated, and it is a tropical storm now, and it is the pressure down to 997 millibars. And again, oftentimes you will see the forecast advisory update first, followed by hey, look, the discussion is already out. That's interesting. So the discussion's out, but the actual public advisory hasn't updated yet. So right now, the winds are at 40 knots or 45 miles per hour. It is expected now to become a Category 2. So that is very interesting now as it approaches probably Cuba in that sense. Let's see if our tracking map has picked up all this new data yet. By the way, and it has, that forecast advisor that I showed you over here, that is what most of the automated systems pick up on, is this forecast advisory. They scrape all this information right here, and that's what populates things like our tracking map and some of your popular apps that are out there. So here it is, forecast to become a Cat 2 as it approaches western Cuba, closer to the eastern side of the Cayman Islands down there, so a little bit further away from Grand Cayman. So the sister islands over here, Cayman Brac, they're going to potentially be in Category 1 strengthening hurricane conditions. Pretty close pass here to Jamaica as well. And then into the Gulf of Mexico, this goes pretty well to the south of New Orleans by day 5. But again, wait till I show you the operational models here. The GFS and the Euro, they are quite split on what they are suggesting down the road. Meanwhile, we do have a system here in the eastern Pacific, and yes, it does look like it's going to move from west to east this way, kind of odd. And then we have another system over here that we need to watch in the coming days. Lots and lots of activity here with this favorable Madden-Julian oscillation and the very warm water that resides all around this region, even into the Gulf of Mexico to some extent, although the shelf water up here finally starting to cool off. So take a look at the latest wide shot satellite view. That's that one area in the East Pac that's got the red. And again, it's moving eastward. You know, it's November. Stuff's different now. And then here is our tropical storm. Got some feeder bands with it. I won't say it's rapidly organizing, but it is definitely coming together quicker. And it looks like it was competing with this piece of energy up here a little bit. But I think it's separated enough, especially with the mountains of Cuba. That is a low-level swirl in there, low-level vorticity. But this is starting to really take over. And again, interest in Jamaica, especially the eastern part of the Cayman Islands, and then western Cuba. Really need to watch this closely, as you're going to get, it looks like, a hurricane. Here's the close-up satellite. Let me refresh this just to make sure we've got the latest frames. And there it is, Tropical Storm Rafael, starting to really ramp up now. Very warm water, high ocean heat content, all of it. Everything's there for this to substantially strengthen over time, and that's why we see the Category 2 prediction, the forecast from the Hurricane Center. So here's an interesting post here from Kieran. This was only about an hour ago. And yes, this was correct. TD18 is now Rafael. And the overall background state looks really favorable. These are some cool graphics that are produced that show the different diagnostics of the models. And generally speaking, the deep layer shear favorable now. The sea surface temperatures generally favorable for the next several days. Just a gradual decline that you can see here. In the mid-level relative humidity, yeah, a little bit steeper decline. But all systems go for the next 2 to 3 days for this to substantially strengthen. And I'm going to tell you, it wouldn't surprise me at all if this becomes a Category 3 at some point. And that is also showing up in the statistical hurricane prediction stuff. 50% chance of an increase of 55 knots over the next 48 hours. That's all inside. You just got to know where to look for it. And it's got the very warm water temperatures to work with. Let's see if I can go back here. Really neat plot right here that shows you that high upper ocean heat content. So yeah, Rafael could be quite the pain in the you-know-what for people down here in the Caribbean. Certainly starting with Jamaica, and then of course the Cayman Islands and western Cuba. Michael Lowry posted this a little over an hour ago. This was interesting too. Eye wall developing near the center in regards to what was our depression. Now, of course, it is Tropical Storm Rafael, so it's coming together fairly quickly today. Let's refresh this to make sure I've got the latest vorticity map. And it still has a little bit of that sort of oblong shape to it overall, but it is concentrated right here. There's that other piece of energy up here. Just lots of areas out here to watch. But this is taking over. Good old Rafael down there, well on its way to strengthening. Not much to stop it until it gets to Cuba from becoming quite the formidable hurricane. And the upper level winds, very favorable as well. There's that anticyclone aloft sitting right over the system, ventilating it. Down at the surface, everything's coming together. Upper levels, everything's fanning out clockwise. So yeah, this is poised to go on to become an interesting November hurricane, to say the least. Now listen, it is going to get into the Gulf. We are pretty sure of that. Let's use, I guess the color black will suffice. Should cut across something like this and end up in the Gulf somewhere in this area over the next 4 to 5 days. Clearly, the water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, where the official forecast has it, 26 Celsius right there, that's all south of that line. 26 Celsius is 80 Fahrenheit. In other words, warm enough right here. Everything south of that line is warm enough to support tropical cyclone activity, and our system should be sitting in here somewhere. So yeah, the water temperatures are going to be just fine for this to maintain itself. But it is November. We do have stronger upper level winds close by, and the prevalence of mid-level dry air that will sap that convection. It has been my understanding and observation over the years that I've done this that dry air is the bigger, faster, more efficient killer of hurricanes than cold water alone, or gradually declining sea surface temperatures. And if you think about it, the injection of dry air, especially from shear, where there's some mechanism to drive that dry air towards the core, really collapses that convection very quickly. We saw that with Milton just the morning of landfall, Wednesday before landfall. It was a Category 5, and then Milton substantially weakened. Why? It was because of that dry air that got in there interacting with the front, and that wind shear helps to inject that dry air in there. Just the dry air around it is not enough. So that should be what happens with this system, but as I'm going to show you, there is a split between some of the global models here, the GFS and the Euro, at war with one another again, figuratively anyway. Let's back this up. So there it is from this morning. This is the 12Z run, and our system comes up. It's now a tropical storm, of course. Comes in there pretty close to, if not right over the eastern part of the Cayman Islands, and then over western Cuba, and into the Gulf we go. And then the GFS brings it into the central Gulf Coast. Louisiana, Mississippi, somewhere around there is a dying tropical system. You know, probably a very weak tropical storm at this point. But then look at what the Euro has. This is pretty interesting. The Euro, same 12Z run, and it is vastly different, clearly. Let's go back to day 5. So there's day 5 on the Euro. There's day 5 on the GFS. Both of them maintain, presumably enough of a system that it would still be a named storm. This is going to be a real interesting duel between the two models as to which one is right. This one implies, the GFS, that we could have impacts for the northern Gulf Coast, whereas the Euro, if we just take this out, it just dies away, nothing, because there's just too much of a upper level wind pattern that shears it apart. So bottom line, it is November, and of course, any hurricane in the Gulf in November has vastly different, I gotta get the telestration to get out of there. There we go. A hurricane in the Gulf in November does have vastly different circumstances to deal with, and I don't see any reason that this will be any different. But you never know until it's all said and done, especially in a year like this where everything has overperformed. One note of caution, and we'll just have to see how this works, but just something that I was thinking about, with this being a fairly compact system, now officially a tropical storm, the sooner it can develop that core and become maybe pretty intense, let's say it does reach Category 3 or maybe more, you never know. I mean, intensity forecasting is where the least amount of skill is. That is still a problem, clearly. I mean, look what happened with Milton. Nobody thought it'd get down into the upper 890s, and it did. Not saying this is going to do that, but if this overachieves, it would take more to hammer at it, and it could last a little bit longer in the Gulf of Mexico. Something to watch for later on. But I do think there's going to be enough inclement, sort of anti-Rafael objects or whatever, you know what I mean, like roadblocks ahead of it in the northern Gulf, that Rafael really isn't going to have a chance to cause too many problems. But we'll have to see. That's still several days away. All right? So that is it from me for this afternoon. We will do a YouTube Live tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Going to get my friend down in Grand Cayman, Adam McDoom, on with me as well. Talk about what they're doing in the Cayman Islands. And we'll take it from there and see what happens with our newly designated tropical storm. All right? Have a good rest of your Monday afternoon. As always, thank you for tuning in. From all of us at Hurricane Track, we appreciate you. I am Mark Sudduth. I will see you tomorrow morning.